Hello, Internet. This is Jason here, host of Fighting Words Financial. I know there's nobody out there right now, but hopefully a few people will come on here pretty soon. Once again, I'm doing this completely unscheduled and without any warning whatsoever. That seems to be my life lately, and especially now because I am on day 2 without any coffee whatsoever. But I wanted to get on early and talk a little bit about what's going on in the stock market today. A couple of reasons why the stock market is down, and I'm getting a lot of email questions about geopolitics, and which is something I find really, really odd because my channel is distinctly not political, but I do want to talk about how geopolitics can affect the stock market here for a little bit. But I am happy to answer any questions that you folks might have. I see one question about Xpeng here, and I'm sorry I can't pronounce your name there, but look, guys, my opinion on Xpeng really has not changed since I first covered them way back in October. I think that as far as the entire crop of Chinese EV companies out there, that they have a shot at probably being the predominant company here in China in the next couple of years. Part of it is how well they've handled their manufacturing. Part of it is regional rivalries. They are centered around one of the most population dense places on the entire planet, and certainly one of the most population dense planets in population dense places in China. And thank you, Leo, for letting me know how you pronounce your name. So look, for a couple of reasons, they're in a really good position, and for many reasons, my position on Xpeng has not changed at all. I think that they are actually going to tear crap up here in the future, that they are going to be one of the most widely sought after companies on the planet in terms of their vehicles. Part of it, like I said, is they're focusing a little bit more down market than NIO is. They're focusing more on that middle class. So if you're a Westerner, particularly if you live in the United States, what you may not realize is that that middle class in China is actually larger than, now they define it a little bit differently than we do, of course, but that middle class in China is actually larger than the entire population of the United States, right? So this is a giant market that's out there, and Xpeng has targeted a much wider section of that market. So EVs in general are down. That is correct, Stephen. China regulations, how are they going to affect us going into next year? So I shared this with my Patreon group, but I haven't really shared it publicly in a video. I guess now is a good time to do this. I'm starting to have growing concerns now about delisting from our side rather than Chinese regulations. The Chinese regulatory environment is definitely becoming stricter. However, when you look at what they say they want to implement, I actually see most of what they want to do as positive for the market. So they're eliminating a lot of barriers to competition for people in areas outside of EVs, of course. But there a lot of times, if you use something that has the Tencent platform on it, or use something that uses Alibaba's platform, you can't actually cross devices on those and share data. Or if you have an Alibaba device or whatever, sometimes you can't use Tencent or something like that. So I'm reading a lot about this stuff that I didn't know existed in China, that you have those restrictions there. So they're removing a lot of these barriers in this case in order to increase competition, not stifle competition, which actually should be good for everyone in the market and should spur innovation. So I don't see that necessarily as a negative. I did it first just because I see that any sort of government intrusion into doing business. Look, the Chinese economy really took off once the Chinese government took the shackles off of the Chinese people, right? If you're not familiar with the history of China and the way that the Chinese people have been businessmen forever, not just in the last 30 years, there's this massive Chinese diaspora all over Southeast Asia and parts of Africa that are focused on these business families, these long relationships back to either Chinese communities in Southeast Asia, the mainland, Taiwan, wherever that may be. Somebody's probably gonna hammer me because I made a distinction between Taiwan and the mainland. But like I said, I don't really do politics. So anyway, I am this is not a surprise to me that once the shackles were taken off of the Chinese population, that they were given the means and the opportunity to create their own businesses, that their economy took off like this. Like, we Westerners are looking at Chinese society through this lens of the last 150 years, since the Taiping Rebellion really sort of ripped the heart out of their industrial heartland and their food production capacity. And it's taken, a little bit like 150, 170 years really to recover from that truly, truly devastating war and all of the chaos that followed behind that. But China is really sort of returning to the place that it has held throughout history, which is one of the most scientifically advanced and wealthiest countries on the planet. That's a reversion to the mean. That's not something new if you have a real depth of knowledge of Chinese history. And I wouldn't consider myself an expert, right? I never would be that living, breathing example of the Dunning-Kruger curve, which, hey man, we've all been on Facebook or Instagram the last year or so. We all know a lot of people who are really convinced that they are very smart, who are always talking about things that they don't know what they're talking about. I'm first to admit that I'm not an expert in Chinese history. This is simply my impression. Bram Moorman says, any thoughts about the Arcimoto suit? Let me see. I need to refresh my thought. Yeah. I'm going to bring up some information on that, and I will get back to you on that, Bram. That's something that I'm not really familiar with. Okay, alleging that they violated the Securities Act of 1933 by misrepresenting and omitting material facts in the prospectus. Okay, so I'll have to go over that. This is very, very common with almost every IPO in the last like 10 years or so. There's always some sort of shareholder lawsuit alleging misrepresentation. Usually these things are settled out of court. The only real winners in any case are going to be the lawyers that put through the case, since they take anywhere from 33 to 40% of the actual payment, and the rest of the settlement is going to be divided up between the thousands and thousands of plaintiffs in this case. So let me comment on that when I have a little bit more knowledge to see if there's any sort of like legs to that lawsuit. But what I would suspect at this point, this is just like all the other lawsuits, they're just trying to force a settlement of some sort. So Dubsatron says, I've never liked EP hype, but I'm looking forward to buying some right now. EV hype. What do you mean by EV hype? EV hype around the stocks or EV hype around the technology itself? Because I'm very, very enthusiastic about the technology itself, and very enthusiastic about where we're going and what this is going to do in terms of changing our economy. Like, I'd love to say that I'm enormously excited about all these green technologies simply because they're green. That's not really the case. I like the technologies because the technologies are kind of cool. The green to me is kind of secondary. It's nice. And we can talk about this all day long, whether concentration and containment of emissions due to using the grid is better than having distributed emissions from vehicles running all over the place, burning fossil fuels. And in terms of efficiency too, or as a gasoline vehicle is anywhere between 15 to 20% efficient from well to wheel, whereas your electric vehicle is anywhere from 70 to 90% efficient. We can talk about that all day long, where the actual benefits lie. But I think a lot of people are kind of in the same boat that I am, where we like to see change. We don't want things to be exactly like the way they were yesterday. And so talking about that, I just want to remind you guys that the super chat features are on if you feel so inclined. Usually a few people donate a few dollars to me during one of my live casts. I always am very, very thankful. And if you guys do that and I don't see it, just please know that I am very thankful when you guys do that. So Tron also says, do you think that Tesla versus NIO will become some sort of EV proxy war with the US and China? I really don't. So I think that they're going to be rivals in the Chinese market first, although it looks like Tesla, of course, is just blowing everyone away there. I think that a lot of people misunderstand how fractured the Chinese market is and how dependent that market is going to be on regional rivalries as well. So I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but BYD just put out a new car, and for the life of me, I can't remember it right now. I think it's called like the EQ1 or something like that, or the something like that. But I just was reading an article on it yesterday. The price is between $15,000 or $14,000 and $19,000 depending on the features, right? This is a four-seater car with a range from 180 to, like, I mean, the NEDC range, of course, was like 300 miles or something like that. So in reality, not NEDC, which really should stand for not even damn close. Really, you're looking at the range of that vehicle somewhere between like 180 and say like 240 miles. And it's using, of course, the lithium ferrophosphate blade battery, which is super safe, charges very quickly. But we're already entering that age, folks, where this car is going to be far cheaper to own than a conventional internal combustion engine for a couple of reasons. In China, these are going to sell well. Number one, you can only get in many of the largest cities in China, you can only get a license plate for your car for your internal combustion engine by going to an auction, where you may have to buy your license plate for anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 and add that to the cost of your vehicle. I'm not joking about this. This happens. You can look this up. There are auctions to buy license plates for internal combustion engines. Whereas if you buy an electric vehicle or any of the new energy vehicles under that Chinese legislation, then you don't pay anything for your license plate. This is one of the biggest incentives. Not to mention the tax incentives and everything that they have for these vehicles. That is probably the largest incentive, is that you don't have 12 to 15, an uncertain price that is going to be in some municipalities more than $12,000, $15,000. That is probably one of the biggest incentives to adopt Chinese vehicles or Chinese electric vehicles in China, and that's probably why they are outselling pretty much everyone in this case. The only market that looks better, of course, is Norway, where last month, 85% of the vehicles sold in Norway, 85% were plug-in electric vehicles. So the era of whether or not electric vehicles are going to happen, that's already been decided, guys. It's happening. If you're not on board, you're falling behind. So yeah. Hello, Jason. Any thoughts on the after-school tutorial companies in China? Government pretty much made them nonprofits overnight. Any chance they can recoup those 90% losses? I highly doubt it. They didn't. So the government didn't make them nonprofits overnight, but they did limit what they can do to raise money from public markets. Basically, they can't go out and use the stock market anymore. I don't know if they shut them out completely from using bonds or something like that. But I have personal experience. I've known a lot of people who went through for-profit education here in the United States. A lot of people in my generation did. Those degrees are worthless. The tutoring they got was worthless. And when I say worthless, it's actually worth nothing. And sometimes they were told this by their instructors. And this was here in the U.S. And this is because this entire industry only existed because of things like government grants. And you don't know how many veterans I know that were, because I live here in Southern California, where we have a high proportion of veterans. And you don't know how many veterans I know that were duped into going to like California College, San Diego, or Ashford University, or something like that. And yeah, I'm going to name these places outright. And because look, at this point, you basically have to prove that what you do is not a scam. But you don't know how many people I know that use their GI Bill for that wasted their GI Bill on a degree that is not actually going to be worth anything. So, I don't think that you're likely to see those come back. I am not invested in any of those. I never did invest in any of those just because I couldn't understand what their business model was. I couldn't understand how these companies had an advantage one over the other. So, yeah. Fresh Aquarium says, I'm still stoked on Chinese stocks, but it's unnerving knowing that you don't own shares in the actual company. Yes, this arrangement has been around like this forever. There's a bunch of other companies that trade like that. It's not just Chinese companies. There's a lot of other companies that trade through ADRs that are representative of shares on a foreign exchange somewhere. So in terms of what's likely to happen, and in fact, it actually already has happened, what's likely to happen in the event of delisting is that for NIO and Xpeng, they're going to and Li Auto and all these other companies, BYD, they're going to lose access to capital markets here in the U.S. But essentially, what NIO, Xpeng, and Li did is what BYD has already done is they went out and they listed, they did a dual listing on the Hong Kong exchange. In that way, you can still own H shares, right? So you can still go through your broker. You can own 8 shares. You'll still be able to do that even if they're delisted here. You can own foreign stocks on a foreign exchange. There's ways to do that. You just have to pay more to do it. I would also anticipate that there's going to be a tertiary listing for all of these companies on the Shanghai exchange at some point. The capital markets in China are just mature now. You can raise billions of dollars with stock offerings in China as well. And I think that is the future, is that all of these companies are hedging their bets right now. And they're not doing this because they necessarily believe that this is going to happen. Number one, it's free money. They're going out and raising money and with a secondary offering on these domestic exchanges. And it was, I think, total raise by NEO something like $1.8 billion or something like that. And then they did a secondary convertible note offering like right after that. So that's great. It shows that their market is healthy enough to support that. But I think they are just hedging their bets, right? Not betting that they are going to be delisted, but they're hedging their bets at this point. And I don't see anything wrong with that. It's a smart move to do that, even if you don't think you're necessarily going to be delisted. I have growing concerns about delisting, growing concerns. I haven't made any moves right now. I haven't bought or sold anything as a result of my discomfort with this, because there's actually nothing going on that I can tell in terms of negotiating a solution for this. My opinion on this is that it's going to be like most other conflicts we've had with China in the past. We sit down around a economic conflicts, at least. We sit down around a negotiating table and we solve these. In this case, we don't seem to be making any progress on this. I think largely because the United States is distracted by a lot of things, by COVID, number one, and by geopolitics with what's going on in Afghanistan. That will blow over more quickly than you think, Afghanistan. Not for the Afghan people, but for us here in the United States, unfortunately. So, so I'm still stoked on Chinese stocks. I'm also unnerved about the regulatory environment, both here in the United States and in China. So Dubzatron wants to talk about full self-driving hype. So I'm going to be quite honest with you guys. I have never been on board with all of the full self-driving hype, all of the self-driving taxis, all of the everything that's going on with that. Number one, I know way too many computer scientists who are simply not convinced that it's possible at this point, and more than a few who are convinced that we're really far away from true artificial intelligence, from true artificial intelligence. However, if you look at the actual numbers where collisions per million miles driven, full self-driving is already better than human drivers. I think people tend to forget how abysmally terrible we are as drivers, as human beings. I was just reading an article where, full self-driving has a problem with running into emergency vehicles, where the software is not recognizing emergency vehicles, and these emergency vehicles are being hit by Teslas. Well, they're not just being hit by Teslas. Emergency vehicles get hit all the time by distracted drivers, by drivers who are subconsciously attracted to those flashing lights and just drive more closely. There's actually been tons and tons of studies on why emergency vehicles get hit more than just anything else standing on the side of the road. You would have to prove to me that full self-driving Tesla vehicles are actually hitting emergency vehicles at a rate higher than the general public. I'm not sure that's actually true. So it's one of the reasons I looked at that article and I was like, huh. But look, this is just the way I think too. So I want to be convinced by actual data before I take a position on that. But I've never been, a huge believer in full self-driving, just because I haven't seen that breakthrough on the AI side. And I talked to too many skeptics, skeptics who should know, who are actual, people who have doctorates in computer science. So I went to, one of the universities I went to is UCSD. I still know quite a few people that work at the supercomputer center there. So, So Denmark Vesey says BYD is a beast. Absolutely it is. And like I said, that new $15,000 to $19,000 vehicle, I think I want to wait to see. I want to wait to see how that sells, but it's enormously I think it's an enormous step in the right direction in terms of bringing an electric vehicle really to the masses. And they're really the first one to do it. You have a four-seater vehicle with 200 something miles of range that only costs between $15,000 and $19,000. It's game over for ICE in that for anyone who basically anyone has a plug in their house, it's game over for ICE. Why would you buy a, and I was trying to explain to someone this the other day, how they think that all of the gas stations are just going to convert to charging stations, and then they're going to sell even more popcorn and soda and beef jerky and all that. And that's how gas stations really make their money. It's not on the gasoline. They make money on soda and beef jerky, right? And coffee and pastries. And they think that all of these gas stations are just going to turn into charging stations and they're going to sell more of that stuff. Well, they aren't. Something like 63% of American, homes have a 220 volt outlet in their garage, and they can charge at home. So imagine if you always leave your house with a full charge, how often are you going to need to charge outside of your home, especially if your car has 250 miles of range, right? So, I mean, maybe you commute 30 miles to work, you commute 30 miles to work, 30 miles home, you come home, your car charges all night while electricity is a lot cheaper. And then when you leave your house again in the morning, you have a full charge. How many times are you going to stop by that charging station if you actually own your own home? And pretty soon apartments are going to, have these charging stations everywhere. You're going to see them on the street. You're going to see them at street parking. People are going to be able to, both pay, 50 cents an hour or whatever to park and another how many dollars per hour to charge a vehicle or something like that. That's all probably going to happen. So, So let me see here. Fresh Aquarium says, I just sold a house. Actually, let me go back a second here. And let's see if I missed anything. All right. So Fresh Aquarium says, I just sold a house, $350,000 with no mortgage. So hoping the market keeps diving and then jump in. That's a nice position to be in. And one of the secrets to my financial success has actually been just really good luck. And like, I never want to attribute everything to, one of the biggest mistakes you can make in your entire life is attributing your success to your own skill set. As what was it? Feynman once said, the great physicist Richard Feynman. He said something like, and I'm paraphrasing this: "It's important not to fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." Right. So that's one of the things you should always keep in mind when assessing your own skill set. Is you're the easiest person to fool when it comes to how skilled you are. Sometimes being in the right place and being one of the only people that has cash is a really good thing. So Fresh Aquariums, I hope that I don't hope that the market goes down, but I hope if the market does go down, that you are able to capitalize on that and it leads to you building like real generational wealth. So it seems like big tech are the ones that are not falling and keeping the NASDAQ up. Do you think there's going to be a correction on those stocks too? I don't know about a correction. Largely, this is kind of driven right now a little bit by geopolitics, but a lot of it is earnings has just been mixed from a couple of different companies. So the market's down like 342 points today, or as of right now. It's less than 1%. If you've been investing for a long time and you still remember the days when the Dow Jones was sub 10,000, 10, 20 years ago, then in your mind, a 342% drop is a lot bigger drop than it is actually today in terms of percentage of the market. So it's actually not that huge. But earnings are kind of mixed, and retail sales were actually, those numbers kind of disappointed a little bit too. I'm sure that there's a lot to do with that. I'm also sure if you look at that southern swath of the country, which economically is in the basically everything from Louisiana over to South Carolina. Economically, this is the poorest region in the United States. It has lots and lots of problems besides just COVID, but it's also an area that has like really low savings rates, and an area where retail sales are always like relatively strong, even though people have really low savings rates, meaning that people make their money and they end up spending it a lot. That area of the country is where some of your retail sales like suffered the most. So I think that it's absolutely, of course, I think that it's temporary. I think that we're coming out of the pandemic. People are finally doing what they need in order to protect themselves, or they're getting vaccinated, or they've already had it, or both, or whatever. But we're coming near to the end. and this has actually been, if you look back in the history of pandemics and in terms of economics, this has actually been fairly predictable. It seems like in the United States, no matter what we do, we don't escape like a year and a half of mayhem here. Even when you look at, I think it was about 650,000 people died from the Spanish flu between 1917 and 1918. We've surpassed that mark, of course, but of course we're almost 2.5 times larger than we were then, so it hasn't made quite the same impact. But that did not lead to a depression. In fact, it led to the Roaring '20s, where the economy took off. And remember, you were also dealing then with the end of World War I, which means the end of a lot of industrial production, and yet still the end of that pandemic spurred a lot of spending and led to the Roaring '20s. So in this case, we don't have a wind down of a giant industrialized conflict like we had in World War I. So yeah, let me see here. Do you hold any Baba? Actually, I hold Alibaba, but I've had those shares forever, man. It's not something that I actively trade. It's not something that I'm likely to get rid of. And I bought 100 shares years ago when they first went public. So I'm not even sure how many I have now. I'd have to take a look. So, Steve, and it's not something I'm looking to get rid of right away. I have taken no action so far, even though I'm getting more and more uncomfortable when it comes to my Chinese stocks. And in terms of Alibaba, it's not a huge portion of my portfolio. I probably hold just as much through mutual funds as I do, or through ETFs. But anyway, so Dubsatron says, or Steven says, if New York stock delists Chinese stocks, it would have huge ramifications. Do you think it's even possible? I would have said when they first started rattling sabers over this that it probably wasn't possible. But things like this have happened before, and the little investor has time to get out. The institutional investors usually bail out way more quickly than your retail investors do. And but yeah, it's absolutely possible that they could delist. Now you can't, the president can't like drop the hammer and say these stocks are delisted now. You can't do that by executive order. The SEC is the one who has to like make that. Yes, the SEC has to like make that decision. But yeah, it could happen. Imagine what China would do if the U.S. did that. That's my concern for Tesla. I don't actually think that China would have that much of a response at all to that. Because honestly, it doesn't really, in terms of money, like they've already taken money out of the U.S. system and brought it over to China and used that to fund NIO's factories, Xpeng's factories, Lee's vehicles, all that stuff. They have secondary listings in Hong Kong and all that. And I think that they feel that they can raise the money they need from domestic markets now to keep going, because those ideas have caught on there now too. So I'm not sure what China would do. Like, we have accounting standards here, period, and they have accounting standards in China as well. They have also, one of their China's chief complaints has been that companies that could not go public on their domestic exchanges, like Didi, because they have zero profits, they have gone public in the U.S. And that was kind of one of their complaints and one of the things that they wanted to regulate. So, so that is I don't know if I don't think that they're likely to do anything to Tesla in that respect. They mess with Tesla a little bit here and there in terms of like forcing recalls and things like that. I think that's really just more throwing their weight around. But I think they like having that production in China. They like being the factory for the world. They like the fact that Tesla is now exporting these vehicles from China. So these are Chinese-made Teslas that are being exported to Europe and sold there. It means also that they have access to technology and employees that have been trained by Tesla. So I think that's very important too. I don't think they're getting rid of that anytime soon. And Tesla's doing a lot of design for that native market as well. They're going to produce, it looks like they're going to produce some vehicles that are designed by Chinese engineers for the Chinese market. So there you go. What does delisting mean? Does the money in the stocks just disappear? That is exactly what it means. So I don't want to cause any alarm here. We are still like 2 years and 4 months away from any decision that needs to be made in this case, guys. There's a lot that could happen. My only concern right now is the United States has a lot of distractions. So let me see here. The stocks that are removed on the exchange, they'll still trade like over the counter and pink sheets and things like that. So, but I mean, who knows what they'll be worth? Any suggestions on how to buy BYD from Canada? I have the hardest time finding a broker that buys that stock. I checked Qtrade, Edward Jones, Questrade, on and on. Huh. So you aren't able to go. You should be able to go to one of the major wirehouses, not necessarily like an app. You like Edward Jones. Well, Edward Jones might not be able to do that, but one of the major wirehouses that has offices in there, like a Merrill Lynch or something like that, or one of those Merrill Lynch heavyweight wirehouses, should be able to help you out. I'm sure they have a foreign trading desk there. So do you follow? Do you? I don't actually. So that, and there's another Huya, HUYA is another company that are still on my list to investigate here. So why is there so much noise on the crypto bill? Add an infra bill when we pay taxes for crypto sales already. Are people not supposed to pay unless it's declared government? No. Part of it is how it's not being regulated as a security right now. It's being regulated as some other, as a non-financial type of asset. So the type of capital gains that you're paying on this could change because of that. Just for example, I'm not saying this is the example that I would use, but if you buy and sell collectibles, there's actually a different capital gains rate used for collectibles than it is for other types of assets as well. So there hasn't been a lot of guidance as far as how you're supposed to pay taxes on crypto sales up to this point. There's been a couple of there's been a couple of IRS decisions, but there hasn't been any legislation on that. So I don't think, and the legislation that I've read so far is pretty well thought out. It came out of nowhere, but it's pretty well thought out. It's not complete. There's a lot of things that they're not even considering in there. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of work to be done on how crypto sales are going to be taxed. Now, let's think about this. There's an added level of complexity here once we start buying things, everyday things with crypto that is appreciated in value, right? So we're going out, and maybe one of these days, crypto is no longer a volatile asset. We're going out and we're actually spending Ethereum in a restaurant or something like that, and people are taking this payment. But I've had this Ethereum for years, and I'm up 3,000% in it. How is that going to be taxed when I used to? So how are you going to consider those? I mean, if I use crypto to buy another asset or to buy another type of crypto, shouldn't that be like a 1031 exchange? It's a like-kind asset for a like-kind asset, right? So I don't know where we're going to go with these. If it's not a security, right? So if it's not a security, then you have to treat it some other way. So I think eventually, though, that the crypto is probably going to end up being a security and regulated in some degree by the SEC. At least the way we trade crypto is. The way we use it for transactions in the future probably won't be. So let me see. Why do you think Bitcoin has recently rallied? No clue. There's no logic to the Bitcoin market. There's zero logic to the Bitcoin market. And I don't expect there would be for years and years and years. So, but yeah, so Dubs, I assume you're saying Tesla. Well, like, why wouldn't they take over the factories and take over the factories and manufacture their own brand like NIO? I will bet. So here's a story that I heard from an engineer who works for Volkswagen, and I'm not going to mention his name, but according to him, Volkswagen ended up acquiring a couple of Tesla vehicles to break them down and reverse engineer them, and they were particularly interested in the software. Tesla found out about this and did something and sent the vehicles a message, and they went dead, and none of the software would work in the cars anymore. I would bet that it's not the actual hardware that that Tesla would want to protect in case of a nationalization of their factory or something like that. It would actually be the intellectual property in the software there. So I would bet they have a way to deal with that. I would bet that. So, and you think that China is playing the long game with a huge hammer coming down at lightning speed once they build proper structure. I don't think they're really going to care that much about competition from Tesla. You have 130 different brands selling vehicles in China right now. Some of them are domestic, and some of them are foreign vehicle manufacturers. But none of them have greater than 14% market share. it's a highly competitive environment. I don't think that the Chinese government really sees anything wrong with that, and I think that they'd rather see the Chinese manufacturers outcompete Tesla than actually take over the company. So it's not to say they haven't done that before, because they definitely have nationalized things before. I just don't see that going on right now. Thanks on the crypto tax clarification from your point of view. Well, nothing should be clarified, by the way, because nothing is clear right now. But yeah, that's coming down the road. So if you could only hold 3 Chinese ADRs, would it be Baba, Neo, and Baidu? So it would have to be 4. It couldn't just be 3. It would have to be 4. You're not gonna force me to choose just 3. So I would add Tencent in there. I think Tencent's gonna end up becoming a sort of like anti-conglomerate. Like right now, and Baidu has this issue right now too. Like Tencent's business model is already becoming sort of cluttered, right? They do so many things that they're not doing anything exceptionally well anymore. And I think that just like some of these other large conglomerates here in the United States, they're going to start spitting out little child companies here. Like, for example, if you've owned AT&T for the last 50 years or something like that, you've now been spit out 100 shares at a time. Shares for for at least 6 or 7 other companies, right? They spun off a lot of these. And there's another company out there that's called Interactive Corporation. They do this every couple of years, where they just had Vimeo that went public a few years ago. And I think they did some dating website. I don't remember which one. Maybe it was like Match.com or something like that. But they also went public a few years ago. But they were bought in the early stages by Interactive Corporation. They develop the brands, and then they make them public. I honestly see that for Tencent in the future, and I see that process is probably going to be aided by some of this government regulation that's coming out. That everyone see this as a negative, but them being broken up is not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the brands that they own could probably attract more funding and more interest on their own. I think Tencent probably knows this, and they're probably planning to be this sort of like they went to this giant stage of being a conglomerate. I think they're going to go through sort of an anti-conglomerate stage at some point and start spitting out more and more things. So Fresh Aquarium Bob says, my 3 Chinese stocks are Xpeng, Huya, and BEKE. Hold on, I got to remind myself what that is. BEKE. And look, guys, just because I'm not enthusiastic about something doesn't mean it's not a good stock to own or to hold or to buy or something like that. It doesn't mean it's a bad one. It just means that I can't be familiar with everything out there. So just looking at numbers here, nothing jumps out at me right away as anything about KE Holdings. It's a giant negative, but I'll have to take a closer look at it at some point. But just like the era we had sort of around the 2010, 2011 timeframe, I think there's going to be a lot of change in Chinese markets here coming up pretty soon. So can you speak about the threat of Chinese companies being taken private? So sorry, guys, getting a call from one of my other businesses here. I had about a free 45 minutes to an hour, and that's about all this is going to last. So the threat of Chinese companies being taken private, I really don't know how that plays out, and that's more of a concern with delisting. Well, at least you get paid when your companies are taken private. In fact, I worked for a regional bank here in Southern California where we had, of course, we had the employee, not stock options, employee purchase plan. And I ended up purchasing a bunch of stock in the bank that I worked for, and the bank ended up being taken private. They got bought out by a larger Japanese company or something like that, and they ended up going private. And I think my average cost on those shares was like something in the 30s, and then it was probably worth in the 40s when they started negotiations, and they ended up buying us out for like $66 a share. So that actually worked out really, really well. And in a lot of cases, they buy it for a premium over its current value. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it does mean that you no longer get to participate in the growth of that company, right? And that's one of the things when Tesla was thinking about, or I don't know how far along they got about this, was thinking about taking the company private. That would have, think about how many people would not be millionaires if that had happened. There's a lot of Tesla millionaires. There's a lot of people that were early investors in Tesla, and they are millionaires because of it. And if they had gone public like they were planning to, I don't remember exactly when that was. That's a lot of wealth to the public that wasn't created. So I do think that's a shame, and it really limits the wealth being created to people who are part of that private consortium of investors who buy it. So yeah, I would be a little bit disappointed with a lot of these Chinese companies going private. With some of them, though, it's not possible. You're not taking Alibaba private. That's not going to happen. Yeah. See, yeah, Wall Street Journal did an article about privatization of U.S. listed Chinese companies so they can relist in China for more later. Seems like the price will be majorly lowballed. Well, so the problem is, in that case, it could be, right? I mean, the reason the price, the bank where I work for, it wasn't lowballed was because they had to get approval from the board, and the board was made up of longtime people in the company and people connected to the banking industry here. If you're talking about some smaller companies that are listed here in the U.S. that listed via SPAC or by reverse merger a few years ago, where the boards are small and they're all Chinese nationals or something like that, I actually think that's you're correct that could probably happen. But yeah, so those are all very interesting possibilities. I think that privatization of some companies that are struggling here on U.S. exchanges is probably inevitable. They're inevitable. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, I did a video on Wunong Net Technologies like way back in December, and I think the heading of that, or the title of that, was "Stay far, far away from this company." So the company, the law firm that actually handled, God, I just can't remember the word for it now, that actually created the syndicate. I don't know if this is the right word, because that actually created the syndicate to bring this company public here in the U.S. They've done dozens of small Chinese companies over the last 10 years or so, and almost all of them are penny stocks now. And when I say penny stocks, they're not even close to that $5 a share. They're more like under $1 a share. So they have and I'm not sure that it's their job to determine whether or not these companies are actually great companies, just whether or not they can go public here on U.S. markets. But they've done this over and over and over. Paulo Mateus just posted something. Thanks, Jason. Your live stream feels more like an appointment with my shrink in days like these. Honestly, man, that is, as a professional financial planner, that is a lot of what I do, is basically act like a non-professional shrink and coaching people off the cliff. Today's volatility, like I said, really statistically is not going to be all that important. I know the market was down something like 500 points earlier. That's just what I looked at earlier. But in 6 months, you're not even going to remember today. You won't, right? Yeah. What do you think the bottom is for Alibaba? I actually, let me see here. I don't know. Let me see what the. Remember, Alibaba as an enterprise has always been undervalued in relation to a company like Amazon or something like that, and that part of that is pricing in the risk, the political risk of being a Chinese company. Right now, at earnings per share, a PDE ratio of about 21, earnings per share about 8.29 dollars per share. I'd say that they, and based on kind of where they are. Hold on a second. Well, I'm just saying, guys, I'm going to make a quick comparison here. I would say that they're actually a little bit undervalued at this point. I'd say that they're pretty close to the bottom in terms of, if you look at what their actual numbers are. And remember, this is not. So when I look at actual the numbers here, and I'm applying the sort of filter that I put on top of it in terms of what I want for the political risk that I'm assuming by owning a Chinese stock, the PDE ratio. I think I'm happy with anything, under 30 for them. And right now they're about 21. And this is an indication right now that this company is probably a little bit undervalued in relationship to the company that I would compare it to most in the U.S., which would be Amazon, right? I think they're somewhere around like 57 times earnings right now, and I would be happy with Alibaba under 30, right? And that is just because I want to price in political risk and the fact that I have no idea what the CCP wants in terms of regulation. But no, I think that we're pretty close to the bottom in this case. And it dropped another almost 5% today. And looks like market just closed, and it's up a little bit after market. So, Sheila's Joe says, "Hey Jason, sorry I missed the start of this. Hope you're good. I am good today. I'm on day 2 with no caffeine though. That's not working out for me. That is not working out for me." So, Bob Johnson says, "Your thought on Cardano overtaking Ethereum for DeFi?" I'd say it's a possibility. I know a couple of people that are not big fans of Cardano. I'd say that the ability to do, what was it, 1.4 million transactions per second or 42 million transactions per second. The difference between those two right now is not all that material, because there aren't that many transactions worldwide being done with Cardano or with any cryptocurrency at this point. In the future, that scale might make a huge difference, right? It could make a giant difference in the future. I just don't think it's making one right now. And remember, the Ethereum is making a series of upgrades now over the next 2 years, where they say that they're going to be able to handle a lot more transactions. They're also moving to proof of stake. They're doing a bunch of different things. So all of the Ethereum killers that are out there, I'm not sure that any of them actually have a chance of knocking Ethereum off. I would have been, a couple of years ago, I would have said, Bitcoin has a chance of being knocked off here pretty soon. I was obviously wrong about that in terms of market cap, and Ethereum is in second place, and everyone else is far behind them. So I don't know. So I own quite a bit of Ethereum, just because I bought a lot of it in the beginning. Not a lot. I bought some of it in the beginning just because I thought their focus on actually using it for transactions for everyday things was going to make it more usable over time. The problem with Bitcoin's network is scale. You can only do a few transactions per second, and but the other problem is this huge entrenched mob of Bitcoin maximalists and people who have an entrenched interest for keeping the way we mine and Bitcoin the same, for keeping the network exactly the way it is. So I'm a little bit concerned that you could be correct, that Cardano could overtake Ethereum in terms of decentralized finance. But also, I don't know, man. I don't know. Ethereum has a huge developer community that's hard to ignore. It does. It has a huge developer community that's hard to ignore. And people forget how many other tokens are actually based on Ethereum's network also. That is one of the things that people tend to forget about. Sheila's Joe, as far as I remember, you're located over in the UK. I was just reading an interesting article on all of the UK fishermen there who now regret voting for Brexit because they're having issues actually selling their products and getting a fair price for them in Europe. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now. A lot of them delve into politics. I'm not going to cover those here. I'd probably be more willing to speak about that in my Patreon group. So anyway, folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I'm actually getting hungry, and I need to eat before my next meeting today. But once again, just had a spare 45 minutes to an hour, and wanted to say hi to everyone, talk a little bit about the market and what's going on today, talk a few people off the cliff if they were upset about today's volatility in the market. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a nice day.